Hi everyone, thanks for coming down to listen to the talk. So as Gordon said, I'm going to be talking about my PhD fieldwork, which I did earlier this year between January and June, and I went out to Brunei to look at mammal biodiversity using camera traps. So Gordon's already introduced me, but I'm Natasha. I'm just going into my third year here at Newcastle University, and my very wordy PhD title is Biodiversity Responses to Infrastructure Expansion in the Heart of Borneo, Brunei Darussalam, which I am going to explain a bit, so don't be intimidated. So before I had applied to this PhD, I knew very little about Brunei, so I would probably expect most of you haven't even heard of it. So it's on the island of Borneo, which is circled here in red. It's a big island in Southeast Asia. And Borneo is split up between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei is the very small country up the top. So that's why I was out earlier this year. So Borneo in general is a biodiversity and endemism hotspot. It has a high number of different species of plants and animals, and a lot of them are only found in Borneo, nowhere else in the world. So for example, Borneo has 247 mammal species and 63 of these are endemic, so they're only found in Borneo. At the same time, Borneo has experienced rapid deforestation, so between 1970 and 2010, it's lost about 30% of its forest cover. But by contrast, Brunei has mostly held on to all its forest and only lost about 8% in the same period. At the same time, there's massive infrastructure expansion happening globally right now. Up to 25 million kilometres of new roads is forecasted to be constructed by the year 2050, and this is actually enough roads to wrap around the world 600 times. One example of something going on that's driving this infrastructure expansion is the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is this massive infrastructure development project worldwide involving about 150 different countries and organisations to construct bridges, railroads, roads, ports, things like that. And one of the projects completed under this project is this bridge here, the Sultan Haji Umar Ali Saifuddin Bridge, or SOAS Bridge, in Brunei, which is pictured on the right. And this bridge connects the Temburong district in red, which was my study region, to the other three districts of Brunei. Temburong is the least economically developed region of Brunei. There's a bit of a wealth disparity between that and the rest of the country. It's fairly rural, and it's also heavily forested, so it's got a lot of nice pristine rainforest, including the Ulu Temburong National Park, which is where this picture was taken. And this park is part of the Heart of Borneo Conservation Initiative, which is this area in dotted red, which protects over 200,000 kilometres of primary rainforest in Borneo. So the bridge was constructed with the idea of helping to economically develop Temburong through things like ecotourism, but infrastructure expansion can have a lot of negative impacts on biodiversity, some of which are listed on the slide. So the central question of my PhD is how will this infrastructure expansion impact Brunei's mammal communities? So we're done with the background, onto the fieldwork, right? That's what I thought, but COVID had other ideas, so I was planning on going out in October. And as you can see from the graph, Brunei had really, really low cases of coronavirus for a long time, and then it started going up just about September 2021 when I was planning on going out. So it was pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and I was getting a bit stressed, wondering if I'd have to kind of overhaul my whole PhD and think of something else to do instead. But luckily, in January 2022, we finally got to go out there, so that's me and my research team in Manchester Airport. So I'm so glad that I did get to go out there because it was really great. I got to meet lots of lovely people, see some really cool wildlife, and spend a lot of time trekking around in the beautiful rainforests out there. So I'm going to tell you a bit about what we were actually doing. So this is my planned study design. So all these dots are where I wanted to put camera traps. I wanted to have a study design that had areas of high, low, and medium infrastructure pressure. So the high infrastructure pressure area is up near the end of the bridge and Bangor, which is the largest town in the Temburong district, and the low infrastructure pressure area is this area down the bottom. The green triangle that you can see is the field study centre run by the university, and you have to reach that by boat, so there's no roads down there. So that's why it's low infrastructure pressure, because there's not much going on. I also wanted to incorporate different distances from roads, and the aim was to do 90 camera traps out for 30 days each and get 2,700 trap nights. that was the plan, but as you've already seen, things often don't go to plan, especially with fieldwork. So that's what it ended up looking like. Turns out it's very easy to plan a beautiful study grid when you're sat at your desk in Newcastle, and a lot harder to actually enact that when you're trekking around, getting very sweaty over difficult terrain in the rainforest. So what I did end up with was 70 camera traps. 70 out of 90 is not bad. They're a bit closer together than I wanted them to be in some places, just because of difficulties getting about. And there were lots of technical difficulties and things like macaques coming up and adjusting it so it's no longer pointing anywhere where you can detect animals, and it's just pointing at the ground instead. So yeah, a lot of my camera traps didn't end up functioning for 30 nights either. So yeah, I've got about, I don't know, somewhere around 2,000 trap lights in the end, which is not too bad. So yeah, I'll just quickly go over my other methods because I'm conscious I don't have a lot of time. So as well as the camera traps, I also deployed song meters, which is like a microphone that you can program with a recording schedule, and then just put them out in the forest and they'll record at the intervals that you said. So I'm going to get some acoustic data from the rainforest as well. We also did some vegetation surveys. So we did hemispherical photography, which is up the top right here, to assess canopy openness, so how much light is getting through to the understory. We also did some assessments of understory density and structure, and we measured the circumference at breast height of a lot of trees around the camera trap in a 20 by 20 metre plot, so I'll be able to calculate the above ground biomass of the different camera trap sites as well. And these three vegetation variables are known to be I'm going to change in response to forest edges, such as those created by roads, so I should be able to assess whether I find that in my study region. So at the end of all of that, I got about 145 gigabytes of camera trap data, which was thousands of photos, which is a lot to go through. Luckily, I was able to hire an undergraduate intern this summer, Georgia, who was a big help, and she's helped me sort out all these pictures into ones that actually have an animal in versus ones that have a false trigger, which has saved me a lot of time. So now I'm on to the fun part, which is identifying species. And some of them, it's a really clear shot. It's very easy to tell what the animal is. So this is my favourite kind of images. I'll be able to do these fairly quickly. Others, it's a bit harder to find the animal. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to see if you can spot it. Did you spot the marbled cat? It's pretty well camouflaged. And then other ones, I have no idea how I'm going to be able to tell what the animal is. So from this, I'm going to be able to, for each site, pull species richness, so the number of different species at each site, the relative abundance, so the number of times I get, number of different incidents that I get each species. And then I'll do some analyses comparing these with environmental variables like distance to the nearest road or the vegetation metrics that we took that I just described to you. I can also look at how these vary with species traits. So if, for example, species with high body mass are more sensitive to roads and you find less of them closer to roads compared to species with smaller body mass. And I was also doing some social science work at the same time. So I was doing household surveys and interviews to ask people about hunting behaviour in Temburong. So I might be able to pull some of that information to identify areas that are at high risk of hunting and see if I can see that in my camera trap data as well. So when I finish these analyses, I'm going to do some scenario modelling. So for different scenarios of how they might do infrastructure expansion in Temburong, where they might build roads and things, predict what they do and how that might affect mammal biodiversity, and hopefully identify what's called least environmental cost scenarios, so what they could do that would have the least negative impact on mammal biodiversity. And if I do that, hopefully I'll be able to feed it back to some stakeholders who make the kind of decisions that would impact biodiversity in Brunei, and they might be able to take that into account when they're figuring out where to construct roads and stuff. So that's like the end of the talking part, and at the end I've got some highlights from my camera traps because I figured that's what you would find most interesting to see. So these are just, this is not everything that I've got, I've not gone through everything, but these are just some things that I was happy to get or just think is cool. So this is the first one. This is the banded palm civet, which we actually ended up seeing one of these on a night walk. They're just one of the kinds of civets that you get in Borneo and identified by their stripes. I just wanted to include this one because it comes up and like sniffs around at the camera, which I thought was fun. This is the tufted ground squirrel, which I had never seen before in my life, and when I saw this on my camera trap, I was just totally confused by its giant fluffy tail, which I think is the idea, because it's supposed to have evolved to confuse predators. So it's one of the endemic species to Borneo. They're pretty rare, so it's very good to see it on the camera trap. It means that maybe there's some thriving populations in some of the places I've put my cameras, and it's just got a massive tail. It's great. It's great. This is something that I thought was really cool as well. This is a linsang. I was going through my camera trap pictures at the Field Studies Centre, so there were some Brunei researchers when I was with me when I was going through these, and they were really excited that I got one of these because it's another rare one. And they're quite evolutionary distinct. It's one of only 2 species in its family, and it's got this banded black and white tail, and that's maybe thought to have evolved as mimicry to mimic the banded krait, which is a highly venomous black and white snake. This is another cool one. This is like my Nat Geo best picture probably because it's posing and looking right at the camera. It's a hosei Langur. This is another endemic species to Borneo. It's actually endemic to an even smaller region, that you can see on the map here. And they're very rare due to hunting, and Brunei is thought to perhaps have the highest density of this species because they don't have to compete with orangutans in Brunei. The more observant members of you may have noticed this is not, in fact, a mammal. It's a bird, but I wanted to include it anyway. This is the Argus, or Argus pheasant, and it's one of the largest pheasant species in the world. They can get up to 2 meters in length, and most of that is tail. They have really interesting courtship behaviour, so I've put dancing grounds because they clear an area of the forest floor to be able to do their courtship dance, and where they flash all their feathers. If you get a chance to look it up on YouTube, it's quite cool. And now about onto my top 3 that I really hoped I would get on my camera traps before I went out there, and I was in fact lucky to get all 3. So this is the Sunder pangolin. I was so excited when I got my first one of these because they are critically endangered. They are thought to be the most trafficked animals in the world, the most illegally traded, and this is largely due to their use in traditional Chinese medicine. I think I ended up getting 4 or 5 separate records of pangolins when I was out there, which is quite good because maybe that indicates Tembrong could be a bit of a refuge for them, which is good for their conservation. Similarly, this is a sun bear. They're also hunted because of their use in traditional Chinese medicine. The bile from their gallbladder is used. I only got 1 record of this. You can't see it that well, but it's like trundling through the forest. It's night because they're nocturnal. But yeah, another one I was really happy to see. And the final thing I was really excited by was the Sunder clouded leopard. This was on my very last camera that I got in, one or 2 of the last ones. And I've kind of given up on getting one just because they have really big ranges and they're quite rare. There's like not that many of them, so I think I needed more camera traps to be in with a chance to get one. But it turns out I had just enough to get 1 record. They're the largest of the 5 cat species in Borneo. They're pretty scarce and shy. And yeah, this is like my favourite thing that I got through my whole field studies season. And I've just got some thanks at the end. I couldn't have done any of this without my field assistants. So thanks to Becca, Beth, Lucy, Jerry and Sawai, who will help me out there in the field. Thanks again to Georgia, who helped me go through the pictures. And that's my supervisory team and all the institutions that I'm associated with. And Actress 2 is who funds me. So